Last year, an anime dropped on Netflix. It was produced by MAPPA and has since become a cult favorite among the best of us. That anime is Dorohedoro. An anomaly in every sense of the word, Dorohedoro burst onto the scene in America in 2020, 20 years after its manga debut in Shogakukan's monthly Ikki, and 2 years after the series wrapped. It is a dark fantasy science fiction seinen about a man with a lizard head, a thick lady who could bench her bed, and their quest to figure out exactly what happened to Kaiman's head in the first place to make it all scaly and such. But it's also so much more. Dorohedoro is special, it's unique, it's twisted beyond imagining, and it's all thanks to one woman with a beautiful mind, Q Hayashida. Q is a goddess of the macabre and the profane. Each and every one of her rainbow of characters within Dorohedoro have but one thing, maybe two, in common: complete psychosis and borderline sociopathy. We are talking about a cast of the most brutal, deranged, and lovable nutjobs you could hope to experience. A class divide with a caste system, a ghetto where the dead come back to life once a year, a human-sized cockroach, and magic. Lots of magic. Some would say, too much magic for one world to hold. And let's not forget the devils among us who rule over all of us. What started out as a morbid fascination about a show with a main character too whacked out to ignore quickly became a joy, and then an obsession. Dorohedoro is one of my all-time favorite manga, rising to the ranks of Berserk and Rurouni Kenshin. It's a classic, a masterpiece that should be as much of a staple in your lineup as One Piece and Naruto. It's also a highly confusing romp of insanity through a world unlike any before it. Today, we're gonna get our swimmies, snorkel, and dive into the filth and the grime. So let's stop screwing around. This is Dorohedoro. Let's get into it. Hey, we finally did it, a full Dorohedoro video. Now, we delayed this for months specifically because we wanted to make sure that we would be able to work with Figurama collectors when they announced their next statue, the Kaiman and Nikaido Elite Figumi Z statue. This is Figurama's first hand-sculpted statue with digitally sculpted base, and I mean, just look at it. There are so many details and Easter eggs. It's that attention to detail that you just don't see anywhere else. Figurama's work is always above and beyond anyone else's in the anime statue industry, and that's why we've only promoted their statues specifically. It comes with 4 swappable portraits, both masked and unmasked, Nikaido and Kaiman, and to this day, my Figurama collector statues are literally like the nicest things I have in my house. These guys' craftsmanship is unreal, and you will be doing yourself a disservice if you are a huge Dorohedoro fan and you do not get this piece before they sell out. There are only 800 being made, and Figurama's other pieces have sold out in under an hour. So if you want this piece for your collection, or you just want to rep the fact that you're the biggest Dorohedoro fan in the entire world, set an alarm for August 14th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The link to the pre-order page is in the description, and you can use code DCNBP for $25 off that statue. Get yours before they're gone, because they always sell out way faster than you think. You want to be on that. You want to be like pressing that button. So thank you so much to Figurama for sponsoring this video and making another awesome statue. Like, I want this thing. What the heck? Anyway, let's get into this. My friends, the hole is not somewhere you want to be. It is a lawless slum where humans are kept in abject poverty and experimented on by sorcerers for kicks. The average inhabitant has been maimed or modified by these attacks. The streets are filthy. The buildings a hodgepodge of cobbled together shacks. This rundown realm is often assaulted by polluted acid rain full of harmful magic residue caused by the sorcerers and their dust from the higher realm. All in all, the hole is shit. It is a shit hole. Laugh at my joke. This, of course, is where we meet Kaiman and Nikaido, a duo which could be best described as pseudo-protagonists. They aren't necessarily neutral good, more just straight up chaotic. And there's really no pretense. Whether you're watching the show or reading the manga, the first thing you're gonna see is a terrifying lizard man deep-throating some dude's entire face while Nikaido makes his homie watch. Now, there's a reason for this, see. There's this guy that lives inside Kaiman's mouth with spiky hair and X's on his eyes. When Kaiman bites down on a sorcerer's face, this guy is able to tell whether or not said sorcerer is the one who made Kaiman into the scaly bastard he is. Kaiman is an amnesiac after all, so, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Now this curse isn't all bad news. It does make Kaiman immune to magic, which is a luxury nobody else in the whole has, and seeing as he's a veritable giant with the knife skills to turn your thighs into sashimi with his eyes closed, he's arguably the most dangerous man in the whole, and he's also pissed off about the fact that someone made him very ugly. Now the guy Nikaido has hamstrung here is Fujita, a low-level mafioso from the N family, and the man getting his face nommed on by a 7-foot gator guy is his best friend Matsumura, who's about to be dead. Now this door that Fujita luckily escapes through is the only way between the hole and the world of the magic users. These are two separate dimensions, you see. Some magic users can create a door at will, others have to use a magic equivalent of the subway, but there are no doors in the human realm for humans to use, so they're stuck in the hole for good. Sorcerers like to travel between the realms to test their magic on humans, give people squid heads, turn them inside out, that kind of fun stuff. Fujita, for the record, is arguably the most relatable and sane character in the series. He's weak, useless for the most part, but seems to see things through clear eyes. He's a mob grunt, but inarguably less deranged and significantly more harmless than anyone else. Despite all the graphic violence and overtly depressing state of the whole, by the end of the first chapter, Kaiman and Nikaido are laughing together and eating gyoza while looking forward to ripping Fujita's skin off the next time they see him. This is extremely important, because gyoza is delicious. And that's the day-to-day. Kaiman and Nikaido have a very working partner-oriented relationship, almost like a male-female buddy cop kind of flirt thing going on, except instead of fighting crime, they're eviscerating any sorcerer who they come across at random. But in doing so, they're actually making the whole a safer place for other humans. The issue is that Fujita got away and has reported back to his boss, N. Now, N is a different story. This guy is trouble. He's an elite magic user and head of his magical Yakuza family. He has a monopoly on most of the businesses in the magic user realm and is totally ruthless, but also charming in his own way, unless he's eating you. He is the high-tier, unmatched top sorcerer with the power of mushrooms, which sounds ridiculous, but if you get creative enough, mushrooms can be pretty terrifying. What makes him as powerful as he is his almost bottomless amount of smoke. Which, yeah, is weird. So magic in this universe is distributed via smoke from inside the body out through the fingers or mouth, and when it comes in contact with its intended target is when its properties are revealed, more or less. How much smoke you have and its effects determine basically how much you're worth in society. N is the smoke equivalent of an atomic bomb, mushroom head and all. Laugh at my joke. So weak sorcerers are basically a lower caste and are not only treated like dirt, but live like trash as well. They aren't in the hole, but where they are isn't much better. Anyway, the man with the lizard head is now on N's shit list. Meanwhile, Kaiman's just doing his thing, eating Nikaido's hot gyoza, working at the hospital for mentally injured humans, and violently removing sorcerers' body parts with extreme prejudice. He's been at it for 2 years, and minus the occasionally ruined pillow and trauma, he's content. He has his own set of issues, terrible nightmares about how he was created and is dying and all, but mostly things are pretty chill. I probably should have mentioned that killing a sorcerer is the only way to reverse the effects of their magic, but now you know. It's part of the reason Kaiman does what he does, other than the fact that he just enjoys doing it. Now, on their daily path of destruction, Kaiman and Nikaido eventually come across a little sorcerer girl named Ebisu. Doing the norm, Kaiman bites down on her head, but she's rescued by Fujita, and by rescued, I mean he pulls her through a door to the magic user realm, while Kaiman's left with nothing but her entire face in his mouth. Turns out, having your face ripped off can leave you with some trauma, and Ebisu is more or less a perpetual derp alert from that point on, even after being healed by Thick Mama Noi. And every time she regains her sanity for a moment, something else traumatizing happens to her almost immediately, keeping her in a perpetual state of derpdom. It's hilarious. Anyway, Noi and Shin are the last of the main crew, the yin to Kaiman and Nikaido's yang. These guys are N's best and brightest cleaners, which is the magic user term for hitmen. Noi is a huge mama, maybe even as big, if not bigger than Kaiman. She's a healer, but her body is a rock, and she can go toe-to-toe with just about anybody in a fight. Also, if you consider the fact that powers in this universe are largely up to the individual's imagination, Noi is basically Wolverine minus the claws and adamantium skeleton, i.e. endless stamina, the ability to go past physical restraints, virtually indestructible, and Shin is not only vicious, preferring to do the majority of his dirty work with the business end of a hammer, but also has the ability to more or less sever anything without destroying it, meaning that if you're wanted for questioning, he can turn you into a bag of goo without killing you and present you to confess in that state. N wants Kaiman's head on a platter, and now it's Noi and Shin's job to get that done. And when all of these characters meet, it doesn't go particularly well for Kaiman. While he does manage to bite down on Shin's head, Shin manages to remove Kaiman's. This is when Nikaido jumps in and reveals herself to be a sorcerer. Not to Kaiman, Kaiman's got his head cut off, but now everybody else knows, and so do you. She creates a door and rescues Kaiman and his head, and all of this is very important, so remember it. Either way, turns out losing his dome isn't as big a deal as you would think it would be, because Kaiman just grows it back. But what's strange is that during a blackout, his original head gets stolen. And if you can't tell by now, one of the greatest aspects of this series is mystery. The players, their backstories, the world, everything in Dorohedoro is alien, new, unique, and buried within the particulars and the politics and the sociology of its own universe. The more that you learn about the characters, the more you learn about the world they inhabit, and each is as confounding, twisted, and exciting as the other. Now, having seen the man in Kaiman's mouth, it becomes apparent to Shin that this dude is more than meets the eye, leading to the N family trying to figure out what the hell is up with Kaiman in their own way, which, mind you, is a bit more sophisticated than what Kaiman and Nikaido have been up to for the past couple years. They find a way to not only identify, but also resurrect the mouth guy. This dude's name is Risu. And the anime does a great job of more or less setting the stage. It covers roughly 40 chapters of the manga, though you're obviously going to get more information from the manga due to its format and budget. There's some changes as well. In the anime, Risu's identity is kept a secret from Kaiman all the way through, whereas in the manga, by the time Nikaido is carved up in the basement of the Devil Church, Kaiman is already aware who Risu is. And while some anime allows you to jump into the manga after a season, I recommend just starting from the beginning of Dorohedoro if you haven't yet. Anyway, after we meet all the core characters, the series takes no time to introduce more ridiculous people, like Professor Kasakabe, a 64-year-old scientist covered in tattoos who looks like a little kid and dissects magic users in order to study them. He's the main reason Nikaido and Kaiman were able to get to the magic user realm, thanks to his handmade door created from the skin and bones of dead sorcerers. Very cool, by the way. I love me some Necronomiconic imagery. His lab also looks like a scene from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And you can't forget about his 10-foot-tall cockroach assistant, Johnson. Shocking, I know. Laugh at my joke. Then there's Kikurage, or Judas's ear for some reason in the Viz translation, and Turkey and Chota, extensions of En's demented family, each with their special, useful abilities. Kikurage even has the ability to revive the dead, which instantly ups the ante of what can and cannot be done in this universe. However, the magic lies in how almost every single one of these characters is inextricably connected to not only each other, but the crazy plot at hand. While trying to figure out what happened to Kaiman's head is the carrot on the stick, it leads the cast through a demented world with its own larger problems. Obviously, the whole is more or less self-explanatory for now, but the magic user realm is no picnic either. Like the whole, it's basically lawless. Even N is a sympathetic character due to this fact. He was born with incredible powers and accidentally turned his parents into mushrooms as a baby and survived by proceeding to eat them, before he was then kidnapped and sold to an underground smoke production facility. For years, they pumped and drive smoke against his will in order to sell it to weak magic users. That is, until he ran out of smoke and was tossed into a river, where a passing devil thought he was dead and proceeded to throw him into hell. Oh yeah, devils. So devils are basically the top of the food chain in Dorohedoro. Powerful beyond imagination, they basically know everything and lord over hell and the magic user realm, and I'm sure they'd mess with the whole too if it wasn't so shitty. In the anime, we're really only introduced to Chitorama and Asu, and while those two are arguably the most important to the narrative for the most part, there are many more. Being devils, they of course spend most of their time pulling pranks and making people have diarrhea while they watch and laugh. They have great senses of humor, you see. But it was in fact Chitorama who took N out of hell when it was discovered he had survived there for years by himself. When N came back to the living realm, he destroyed the slave factory and freed its inhabitants, who became the first members of his family. And finally, the last piece of this puzzle is the Cross Eyes. These guys and their enigmatic boss are low-level sorcerers and magic invalids. They're criminals, drug dealers, which basically means selling black powder to people all the way up to murder. Black powder, for the record, is a drug which enhances a sorcerer's magic, but it's addictive and chaotic in nature. They become a major issue for N as they begin to dismantle his family piece by piece. They hate high-level magic users, and part of their manifesto is to rid the world of them. The mysterious boss of the Cross Eyes even came out victorious against Shin and Noi at the same time, and also avoided being killed by N, who mushroom nuked an entire city just to kill him. Due to the crosses on Kaiman and Risu's eyes, the gang are inextricably tied to the mystery around Kaiman's past and his head, as well as tying them to En and his family. The anime leaves you having kind of explained some of this, but for as insane as it is already by the end of the show, what comes after is one of the wildest roller coaster rides I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing. So naturally, I want to take a minute to talk about Q Hayashida and her manga. She's come under some scrutiny in the past from critics, particularly for her art style, a complaint that I find blasphemous. Granted, the first few chapters of Dorohedoro are a bit scratch-happy, but I think her work is beautiful. You know, if you can appreciate things being deliberately ugly and slightly disturbing. The anime does a good job of converting what she created, but this woman deserves all the credit and praise in the world. It's not easy being a mangaka, and especially not being a woman in Japan. She worked consistently to achieve what she has, and 20 years later, she's finally getting only some of the recognition she deserves. As a writer and artist, she has a unique style that is 100% her own. It is a mix of highly detailed and highly stylized dark imagery with an excellent sense of humor. She has the chops to pull off serious conflict, mind-boggling mystery, and laugh-out-loud jokes while managing to make you fall in love with horrible people. And not horrible in the Kazuma Konosuba way, I mean psychopathic murderer kind of horrible people. Her world building and its realization brings other contemporaries to their knees. I cannot sing this lady's praises enough. Her growth is palpable from chapter to chapter, and honestly, the anime is just the beginning. Dorohedoro is a whopping 167 chapter manga, and these are big chapters, which make up 23 tankobon volumes, of which I own 22, because fucking volume 23 has been sold out for over a year. The quality of these volumes is of the highest tier, from the pages to especially the covers, the likes of which I have never seen before. To see this kind of care put into the release of a manga shows exactly what a company like Viz thinks of her work. And for a creator of her caliber, I want to spread the message. Also, let it be known that the official translation of the manga is filthy. It's like the way Tyler and I talk on the Bonsai podcast. No holds barred, and the scanlations hold no candle in this case. Now, it seems that the Dorohedoro anime has done well on Netflix, which is the main parameter regarding the creation of a second season. However, we've had the pandemonium affecting business for a year and a half, and it's particularly disrupted the production of anime and the quality of life for the animators in Japan. For a healthy season 2, we are looking at late 2022 or early 2023. Until then, all you got is the manga, which for the record needs to make sales in order to further incentivize the continued production of the anime. So do yourself a favor and get a new book. And from here on out, it's spoiler land. We're going ham on this series, trying to iron it out in a digestible manner for this video. So if you want to read the manga fresh and exciting, then it's time to go. But if this is too enticing to leave, I don't blame you, you know what I'm saying? Stick around, subscribe, thumbs up, whatever, here we go! Shortly after the end of Season 1, we're introduced to the head honchos of the Cross-Eye Gang, thanks to Risu tracking them down to figure out who killed him. However, these dudes are super poor. The boss has been gone for a long time, and it's obvious the organization is more or less falling apart. Around the same time, we witness other Cross-Eyes in a battle with Shin and Noi. Like Kaiman, they use knives, but they're keenly aware of how to fight sorcerers hand to hand, and especially where their weak spots are. See, each sorcerer has a special organ which produces their smoke, as well as a devil tumor stuck in their brain. Why do sorcerers have a devil tumor? Because Q Hayashida. However, they serve as the embodiment of a sorcerer's life force. Destroying the devil tumor causes true death for a sorcerer without possibility of resurrection, for the most part. Regardless, this form of combat was created by the Cross-Eyes boss, who clearly had a medical level knowledge of sorcerer anatomy. Now, I mentioned briefly that the Cross-Eyes are black powder dealers, but where they get their black powder is important. As low-level sorcerers, most of them can't even produce smoke, so they have to get it from other sorcerers. This is where the murder and mayhem, as well as some pretty questionable experimentation, comes in. See, it turns out you can take the devil tumor out of a deceased sorcerer's brain and squeeze out black powder from it, making the substance free and their sales 100% profit, which is a good deal. But taking black powder basically means you're inhaling the innards of a living brain tumor, which is definitely something you'll only see from a Hayashida work, or maybe it's poop, I don't know. Now, there's about 5 million things that happen within this series that could be talked about. The world is wide enough and the characters deep enough to create a channel completely devoted to Dorohedoro if you wanted to. So what I'm going to do here is stick to the main conflict for sanity's sake, and in order to do this, I'm going to be jumping back and forth through time a lot in order to explain things. Deal with it. Also, you will see I'll be masterfully using a literary technique created by the lorehounds of the Fate franchise called Don't Worry About It. It's a high-level form of extrapolation, so try not to get lost. Now, it's said that the devils are the masters of the sorcerer realm and hell, which they are. However, not all devils are created equal. Asu, who is a good friend of Nikaido, is actually stripped of his devil status at one point after trying to fool Chidoruma. Basically, modern devils are created or transformed. It's a process which takes an entire year of intense training and is reserved for only a select few extremely talented sorcerers. The training builds the body and warps the mind. Most people don't make it through and either die, quit, or commit Suicune before it's over. However, the resulting devil is gifted with near omnipotent magic and some minor personality defects. I mean, to live forever and be all powerful, you're gonna have to live your best life, you know? The extreme euphoria and creativity is a plus, but the complete indifference and random cruelty must just be there to keep the fire going. 'Cause hell, laugh at my joke. Chidoruma, however, is the primordial devil. He's the first thing to exist in this dimension, meaning he not only created hell, but also the sorcerers as well, simply because, well, he was bored, which is understandable. I mean, there was literally nothing going on. So he sculpted the sorcerers out of mud, and they eventually evolved into what they are now. He made the ones he liked into devils like himself, and by eventually creating the sorcerer realm, he drew the line between life and death. This too eventually made him bored and annoyed, because he realized he'd basically just been playing with himself the whole time. That's when he found the human dimension. It's important to remember that Chidoruma had nothing to do with the creation of humankind, so he was fascinated by them. At least for a bit, you know, he took some pictures, maybe did a painting, but being a god is mostly boring. So Chidoruma went home and continued his usual antics of making life difficult for sorcerers and randomly dropping poop on them or whatever. Now, when the sorcerer race was young, they were savage and full of power. I don't really see how that's different from how they are now, but apparently they were more savage back then. I don't know. The next time Chidoruma visited the human dimension, he found an actual mountain of human corpses, all of whom were killed by sorcerers. It was to the point where the entire human race was almost wiped out. It wasn't Chidoruma's problem though, so he took off for a bit, and hundreds of years later, found the mountain to have been dissolved into a bottomless pit of refuse, a seething lake of bio-waste tainted by extra-dimensional toxins from magical smoke. And this is Hole. It's why the dimension was named the Hole. And the hole in the middle of the hole is called the Lake of Refuse. It's the sadness and despair and anger of countless human souls seething in a toxic mass of hateful goo made from the putrefied bodies and contaminated by magic smoke. There's probably some piss in there too, who knows? Chidoruma loved it. Now I mentioned that all the characters are interwoven into the plot, past, present, and future of Dorohedoro. Well, Dr. Kasukabe, or Hayes, is actually one of the major players in the series, despite his mild outward appearance and kind of side character feel. After his wife, a magic user he rescued from Hole's toxic reign, disappears back to the sorcerer realm to become a devil, Kasukabe started his research on magic users, using said wife as his jumping off point. Many years down the line, he becomes responsible for not only Shin realizing his power, but due to that, the end of the human militia, which protected the Hole's inhabitants from sorcerers because, Shin killed all of them afterwards. There is a clear disparity in the world of sorcerers. Given what we see in Dorohedoro, many of the presumed useless sorcerers have unprecedented power, but it's often misunderstood or hard to access. So as you can see, standardized testing is just as useless in the sorcerer world as it is in ours for judging a person's worth. Regardless of political opinions, Risu, for instance, has super high tier curse magic, but it can only be activated by his death. Natsuki has impenetrable defense magic, but it was only realized when her arm was cut off. And of course Shin was born with the ability to sever without killing, but lacked outlets for his smoke. A problem Hayes solved for him after Shin tried to dig out his own smoke pipes. This created problems, like the evisceration of the human defense force, but also a good relationship between the doctor and the kid. However, there's another young man who crossed paths with Dr. Kasukabe that would set this whole series of events in motion. Coleman was a normal human from the Hole who basically hated his life. I mean, let's be real. Feeling like prey and fearing for your life all the time while living in filth and grime isn't exactly anyone's dream. He was also 15 and feeling edgy, so instead of accepting his circumstances, he decided to become a magic user after reading a published treatise by Kasukabe. Now obviously, you don't just become a magic user, or everybody would be doing it. This whole plan is really just a pipe dream, but but he annoys Hayes until he's allowed to become the doc's assistant. However, the two are always dealing with the major issue of not having a live sorcerer to learn from. Cutting up dead bodies is great and all, but you need to know how they work when they can still scream. This is obvious. The problem persists until they hear about the militia, which was still active at the time, having thrown a live magic user into the lake of refuse. I desperately jumps into the lake to recover this dude. However, I gets burned, disfigured, and is at the edge of death from the toxic cesspool. But throughout his time as Hayes' assistant, I had actually been working on a surgical procedure to turn himself into a magic user. As a last wish, he begs the doctor to perform it on him. The surgery is done, and I survives long enough to recover, only to get murdered by some sorcerers. However, his body has been infected by the Hole, which is the entity created from all the goo of millions of murdered humans, which makes up the Lake of Refuse, and he rose from his grave a different man. I had transformed into Kai. Kind of. Laugh at my joke. Here is where things truly get weird, because it's all been pretty casual so far. Past the halfway point, Dorohedoro seemingly dissolves into complete madness. Every turn of the page is as confusing as it is exciting, but damn, if it isn't some of the strangest notions to reach paper in the history of mankind. So Kai is technically 4 characters. He's I, he is Kai, he is Hole, and he's also Aikawa. Now at this point, I and Hole are dormant, but Kai and Aikawa are split personalities. Think Fight Club, spoilers I guess. Regardless, Kai is more Hole, while Aikawa is more I. After making it to the sorcerer realm through the happenstance of saving some kids who end up becoming Kai's lackeys and the leader of the gang that I talked before, anyway, Kai becomes the founder and leader of the Cross Eyes. It's because of his background knowledge from working with Hayes that he's able to develop the vital point fighting style of the Cross Eyes and how he realizes the method of creating black powder via devil tumors. Kai is brooding and violent with big X's over his eyes, a mark from Hole, which becomes the calling card tattoo of his followers. Now, if you fast forward from here to the point where the Cross Eyes are getting renowned, especially for killing off members of the N family and taking their heads, which from the outside seems like a savage punishment, but it's really just to steal their devil tumors to make Los Dragos, which is perfectly explainable, a hit is finally put out on Kai, or at least the nameless, faceless leader of the Cross Eyes. And just a reminder, we're still talking about events that happened before Dorohedoro even begins here. Regardless, this is when Kai almost takes out Shin and Noi all by himself, and when En shows up and lets his smoke loose and creates the Mushroom Kingdom. However, and it's never explained how or why, but in that moment, Kai removes his own head, which makes him inexplicably immune to magic, and escapes through a door to Hole. This moment is why in the anime, En is so set on having Nikaido become his partner. Remember the whole opening up the chest and ripping out the fleshy flappy thing, which they both signed to make them partners? Yeah, Kai traumatized En so bad in that moment, he decided he needed a magic user with time travel abilities to go back to that point and make sure his enemy was dead. But of course, he wasn't. And I'd love to hear your theories on how removing his head made Kai immune to magic. My guess is that his body is more or less an artificial reconstruction by Hole, or that it's so infused with gunk and toxins from Hole that magic can't affect it, and only the heads, which hold the personalities, are subject to affliction, but I don't know, that's just my thoughts. So like I said before, Kai is not always Kai. There is an inner struggle taking place at the core of his being, which reverts him back to a personality named Aikawa, who is shown in the anime. He's the one that wears like the thing that looks like a gas mask, and is also Risu's best friend pre-mortem. Looking exactly like Kai, minus the crosses on his eyes. I mean, it's the same body, it's just with Hole's influence pushed down. Aikawa's personality is exactly like Kaiman's. It's through this personality that he meets Risu, and also how Risu dies. Aikawa doesn't have access to Kai's memory. He basically blacks him out subconsciously because he's a big baby, but Kai knows what Aikawa does, kind of like a one-way mirror of the mind. Wanting Risu's curse magic for himself, because I guess you could take people's devil tumors out and then put them in your own brain, Kai murders Risu. However, Curse, the manifestation of Risu's magic, relentlessly hunts Kai at all times afterwards. I mean, that's the whole point of the curse. It kills the person who kills the guy who, don't worry about it. Kai eventually attempts to escape to Hole, but Curse follows at the last moment, devours his head in the titular spot Kaiman stares at in the first chapter of the manga, which is where Ebisu comes in. Before having her face ripped off by Kaiman and becoming a blubbering moron, Ebisu was a well-to-do smoke dealer and black powder addict. She's also 13, so repent. It's in fact Ebisu's smoke, which has been warped by her constant black powder usage, that saves Kai/Aikawa. Due to the black powder, her magic, which turns people into lizards, is irreversible without Ebisu's direct intervention or death. As Curse is making his way into Kai's body through his neck, Kai pops a bottle of Ebisu's smoke, giving him a lizard head, trapping Curse in his mouth, and causing him to have amnesia. All of this magic, along with the presence of Hole within Ai, creates a block in which nothing can act and therefore makes the guy totally immune to magic, and this is the birth per se of Kaiman. Now I know there's a lot of explanation, but I'm guessing for the most part you didn't just finish reading Dorohedoro yesterday, and even if you did, it's so long and convoluted, the least I can do is set some groundwork for you to stand on. Irony to follow. Anywho, this is why Kaiman has nightmares and headaches, why they get worse when he travels to the Sorcerer Realm. Inside him is not only Kai, but Aikawa, Ai, Curse, and Hole, all struggling to get out, but stymied by Ebisu's irreversible magic. If you pay close attention, you can see aspects of all these characters inside of Kaiman. He's always had Aikawa's personality, but sometimes he mopes like Ai. He's got the ferocity and hatred for sorcerers that Kai holds thanks to the influence of Hole. If Q Hayashida mapped all this out from the beginning, then props to her. Like, I cannot imagine creating something like this without just yeeting it as you go. The plot is insane. At least the gyoza is consistent. Now, one of the mysteries left in the anime at the end was who stabbed Nikaido in the back, and the answer is obviously Kaiman. Half under the influence of Kai, the stab injured her, but also opened up her body in the perfect way to have her contract easily removed. Now, on Kaiman's journey with Nikaido to figure out his past, En catches up with them to exact vengeance for not only all of the henchmen Kaiman killed, haha, but also for taking Nikaido from him. Once again, using that creativity of his, En creates mushroom spores in the air which Kaiman inhales, only to have them explode from within his body, and at the exact same moment, far away, Ebisu is being attacked by her clone, don't worry about it, and dies, removing the spell from Kaiman's head just as he's about to die and revealing Aikawa's face. With the lizard magic dispelled, Curse, which again is Risu's magical alter ego slash JoJo stan, is now free and takes off. Kaiman, who's presumed dead, is teleported away by Asu, who is now Kawajiri thanks to Chidoruma flaying him alive and stripping him of his devil power. Don't worry about it. Of course, thanks to the presence of Hole inside him, Kaiman is kind of semi-immortal, but also his head is a mess because of all the people in there. So after he heals from explosive mushroom death, he becomes Aikawa again, and then eventually Kai, who proceeds to lead a genocide against magic users and even kills En. If you couldn't tell by the whole genocide thing, Kai is now almost entirely overcome by the presence of Hole within him. He begins to create a suit of magic user skin and devil tumors to artificially make himself a devil. The whole thing is really a mess. I mean, sorcerers are dying by the thousands and such. It even becomes obvious to those closest to Kai that he's changed, which is impressive because they're all pretty stupid. He does get his head chopped off again though, don't worry about it, which surrenders his body back to Aikawa, only for Aikawa to be imprisoned in En's fortress, which is now the Cross Eyes lair. And some more crazy shit happens, don't worry about it. And Hayes shows up, having realized finally that Aikawa is probably Ai, which makes Aikawa's head pop off and Ai's burnt, messed up head grow in its place, and then friggin' Ai surrenders his body to Hole and grows like 8 more heads, and then those heads become 4 heads and are all sucked up into the devil suit made of skin and tumors, yeah. So then it starts raining in the sorcerer realm, right? And all the sorcerers left alive start dying from the toxic rain. Also, it's never rained in the sorcerer realm before, so this is like a big deal. It's super toxic and basically leaves them bedridden or will just kill them. It's honestly a lot like when it rains in San Diego. Anyway, more or less, all the important characters have followed the new devil suit Ai to Hole, where it just starts eating trash until it's brought down into the central department store, which happens to stand particularly on the Lake of Refuse, aka the mass grave of millions of sludgified angry people, and Devil Suit Ai's skull is cut open, so it starts to cannibalize all the Cross Eyes, making them rethink their life choices, and then finally it smashes a hole in the floor of the department store, which reveals the Lake of Refuse, and then he dives into it. Now when the department store starts getting warped is when shit gets really insane, because Kai actually turns into a straight up devil and then uses these sewage tubes that are part of him to turn all the humans into zombies, right? And the only thing that can hurt him is this kitchen knife that Nikaido has to borrow from Hayes' wife, who's actually a devil, if you remember. I told you that before. But also, Kaiman is alive again, because remember, after his head got chopped off for the first time by Shin when they met in the hole, his decapitated head was stolen. Remember how I told you that was important? You should remember it. Well, it turns out that head grew a new body and is now Kaiman, but time and space are weird inside the warped out department store. Ai's personality possesses the new / old Kaiman and uses the kitchen knife to cut off super evil Devil Kai's head, but Devil Kai has 2 more heads, so look, obviously we know that Dorohedoro is insane, and honestly, the more explaining you do, the more psychotic it sounds. I mean, I haven't even mentioned Devil Nikaido. There's like 50 characters that I just don't have room for. There's a lot, particularly in this section, but what is important is Whole, the entity, who eventually takes form after all of Kai's heads are chopped off. The entity has finally had Ai's original body sacrificed to it and is now single-minded to a fault. All it cares about is killing all the sorcerers. Even the rain in the sorcerer realm is being created by dead spirits leaking sludge through Whole's giant door in the sky to the magic user dimension, but ironically, all point to any morals or convictions that any of the characters have really goes out the window at the end. When Kaiman accepts himself or himself, let's just say all the parts of his being, he also accepts that despite hating magic users more than anything, he also has always wanted to be one. And in order to defeat Whole and rescue his friends, he's gonna need to become one. Meanwhile, during all of this, Chidoruma is just having the time of his life. He knew all along that there was an entity forming within the Whole, one with power comparable to his own, something he didn't make and didn't have control over. He nicknames Whole Holy, and he cheers it on from the sidelines. Meanwhile, the rest of the devils who have had their devildoms stripped from them, don't worry about it, grant Kaiman magical power. The power of Gyoza. An intense Gyoza-filled battle takes place as the countless bodies killed by sorcerers fill the Whole once again, but even Gyoza has its limits. It's at this point that Kaiman realizes that he and Whole have permanently become part of one another. He realizes with absolutely no explanation that he can suck the sludge out of Whole, and in doing so, frees the End family who is trapped inside of it. I guess the department store and Whole were basically the same thing, don't worry about it. Also, N is alive again, don't worry about it. Then Shin, who's mega pissed off at this point, slices up Whole, revealing none other than a devil tumor inside it. That's when it clicks for Kaiman that not only he, but also Whole have stooped to the point of becoming magic users, and in one final blow with the kitchen knife, he destroys Whole once and for all, basically putting everything back to normal. Also, Chidoruma is bummed, especially because he lost his bet with the rest of the devils and has to be turned into a human with no powers or memories of his past life for 5,000 years. Then again, I doubt he's actually bummed. He's probably just acting like that because not only did he get an unexpected outcome, but being human resolves his boredom problem. Maybe this was all part of his plan from the beginning. I don't know, you tell me. Okay, at this point, you're probably asking yourself, what is the deeper message? Where is my analysis? Well, I'm glad you asked. The title, Dorohedoro, is wordplay by Q Hayashida. Doro means mud. Hero means vomit or nausea. Hedoro is also a Japanese word which means sludge. And oozing, or at least the onomatopoeia of oozing, is dorodoro. The he in between is a Japanese particle which means moving. Basically, the name Dorohedoro can be translated into grime and filth, moving through the slime, mud and sludge, disgusting filth, etc., etc. Obviously, this is a reference towards the lake of refuse and Whole, but also the universe of Dorohedoro as an entirety. It is a disgusting place, full of disgusting people doing disgusting things in a disgusting comic. Just scrolling through the manga is nightmare fuel. There is truly an asinine amount of horrific imagery present within really what I can only describe as a comedy. Also, the concept of chaos is constantly brought up, not by the characters, but by the narrator. This is even referenced in the anime after the credits. The rest is still in chaos. That is Dorohedoro. Essentially, you can give Dorohedoro any meaning you'd like, or I could. Here's some examples. Obviously, there's notes of enduring friendship, especially between Nikaido and Kaiman, Asu and Nikaido, Akaiwa and Risu, and Shin and Noi. Sorcerers and humans can be friends. People in different castes can find common ground. So obviously, there's a lesson that, here we are, we're all people. There's also overtones of coming to accept oneself, which are present in Fujita in his mission to avenge his friend Kaiman decapitated, and especially in Kaiman coming to grips with all the different aspects of his personality. There's certainly the idea of the curse of hatred, which is something that we see in movies like The Grudge, and misdeeds getting punished through cosmic karma, with Whole literally becoming a more or less sentient creature comprised of the hatred and sadness of millions upon millions of murder victims left to rot like trash. There's the presence of cruel and uncaring gods, which brings up the question of misplaced faith, seeing as the sorcerers worship the devils, who are basically just children. There's certainly social commentary about the way people who are deemed lesser feel and are treated, and how that would work in an anarchistic society. But honestly, I think trying to stick anything like that to Dorohedoro is antithetical. The whole epic is crude, insane, belligerent, and highly nonsensical, even though it actually makes sense almost if you take the time and energy to lay it out like I have today. But even still, because both dimensions have no law, technically nobody did anything right or wrong. Therefore, there are no good guys or bad guys. Therefore, the conflict was almost meaningless. We cared about the characters we knew because we knew them and watched their struggles. But imagine being a bystander in this story, like some random chick from The Hole, just watching all this go down and not having a horse in the race. No, Dorohedoro exists for one reason, and it was so Q Hayashida could have fun drawing monsters and boobs and blood and guts and make poop jokes. And you know what? That's why I love it. It's a comic made for weirdos by a weirdo, and it isn't appropriate for anyone, which is exactly what I would make if I had the talent to do so. That doesn't mean it's bad. On all accounts, it's a marvel of modern storytelling. However, it's completely unreliable. We come out of the story having learned absolutely nothing for certain, because between Kitsuragi's ability to bring people back from the dead, Noi's ability to heal all wounds, and Nikaido's ability to travel through time, virtually anything could have happened to anyone in Dorohedoro, and it could have been reversed. If Q made a mistake, she could have written herself out of it almost instantly. Therefore, there's little in the way of stakes in this story. It's just a roller coaster ride through a truly unique and mildly terrifying mind. It's like a crazy trip with high highs and low lows, especially once it all gets into the department store. But you know what? I've taken that trip a couple times, and I'd take it again in a heartbeat. It's that fun. And in the end, that's all that really matters. So thank you for sticking around and watching the entire video. Don't forget to check out the links in the description so you can get yourself a pre-order on this awesome statue. We'll be back very soon with a video on Dead Leaves and then a video on Ranma Half. I'm very excited about Ranma. Subscribe for those videos. Thank you, Figurama. This time I'd like to send a special shout out to @SirSnickles for literally liking every single one of our tweets the second we tweet it. Thanks, dude. Like, we noticed you. That means a lot. Lucky Patron of the Week, Demi-chan Lewd Secretary, Super Saiyan God of the Week, Luthi the Zombie Biker. My name's Mike, this is Bonsai Pop, and I'll catch you next time.